Daniel stood in a long row of royal guards, with his shoulders back and his chin level. His uniform was perfect, his boots shined, and his face looked calm. The air was cold, and the sky was a soft gray that made everything feel quiet. People filled the streets in silence, holding small flags and flowers. Some whispered prayers, and some simply stared with wet eyes. The city felt like it was breathing slowly, as if no one wanted to disturb the moment. Today was the Queen's funeral, and the whole nation was watching. The rules for Daniel were clear, and they had been repeated in training many times. A guard must not move unless commanded, and a guard must not show emotion. No waving, no turning the head, no bending the knees, and no reaching out. Protocol was like a wall built from discipline, and it protected the ceremony from chaos. Daniel had followed protocol for years without a single mistake. He had learned to stand still through heat, rain, and long hours of waiting. But that morning, something inside him felt different, like a memory pushing against the wall. From far down the road, the slow procession began, and the sound of distant drums arrived first. The rhythm was steady, like footsteps that never hurried, and it made the crowd go even quieter. A line of officials walked with careful timing, each step measured and respectful. Behind them, the coffin moved forward, covered with flowers arranged with perfect care. The colors were gentle, and the scent carried in the cold air. Daniel did not move his eyes, but he saw it in the corner of his vision as it came closer. He felt the weight of the moment, heavy and real, even while his body stayed still. Daniel's name was simple, and his life had once been simple too, before duty shaped him. He grew up in a small town where his mother, Mary, worked long hours to keep their home running. His father, Tom, had been kind, but illness took him when Daniel was still young. After that loss, money became tight, and worry became normal in their house. Mary tried to hide her fear, but Daniel saw it in her tired eyes. Daniel wanted to help, yet he was only a teenager with no clear path. He carried a quiet pressure in his chest that never fully left him. One winter afternoon years ago, Daniel had traveled to the city with Mary for a hospital visit. Mary's health had grown weak, and the doctors asked for more tests and more time. They sat on a bench near the palace grounds, because there was nowhere else to rest. Daniel stared at the ground and felt like the world was too big and too hard. He did not cry, but he felt close to it, and he hated that feeling. Mary held his hand and tried to smile, yet her fingers were cold and shaking. Daniel whispered that he did not know how they would survive another month. That was the day Daniel saw the Queen up close, in a way he never expected. She was walking with a small group, dressed simply, and her steps were slow and steady. Most people did not notice her at first, because she did not arrive with noise. Daniel noticed because the adults around them grew suddenly careful and respectful. Mary tried to stand, but her legs trembled, and Daniel helped her sit back down. The Queen saw that small struggle, and she stopped, even though her aides looked unsure. She asked Mary if she was all right, and her voice was gentle, not sharp or distant. Daniel never forgot how normal the Queen sounded in that moment. She asked Daniel his name, and she listened as if his answer truly mattered. Daniel told her about his father, about Mary's illness, and about the fear of failing his family. He expected quick words and a fast goodbye, but the Queen did not rush him. She said that service was not only ceremonies and uniforms, but also care for people who feel unseen. She told him that strength was not the absence of pain, but the choice to keep moving forward with kindness. Then she placed a small note in Mary's hand and said help would come through proper channels. Help did come, and it came in a quiet, respectful way that did not humiliate Daniel or Mary. Mary received support for treatment, and Daniel was guided toward a training opportunity. No one made it public, and no one used it as a story to impress others. Daniel later learned that the Queen had a habit of noticing small struggles and acting without fanfare. He did not know if she remembered him, and he did not need her to remember. He only needed to remember what she had done, and how it had changed his direction. That memory became a private promise inside him, a promise to serve with real meaning. Now, years later, Daniel stood as a royal guard while the Queen's coffin moved closer. The crowd was silent, and even the wind seemed to slow down as the procession passed. Daniel felt the old bench, the cold fingers of Mary, and the calm voice of the Queen return in his mind. His hands stayed at his sides, yet inside his gloves his fingers tightened with emotion. He could hear his training in his head, repeating the rules like a warning. But he could also hear his own heart, saying gratitude is also a form of duty. As the coffin reached the nearest point, Daniel felt a decision forming, and he knew it would change everything. The coffin moved past Daniel slowly, carried with perfect balance and care. The sound of the steps echoed in his chest like a deep heartbeat. The crowd remained silent, and many faces were lowered in respect. Daniel felt time stretch, as if the moment refused to move forward. His training told him to remain still, strong, and unseen. His memory told him that this was the woman who had changed his life. The weight of gratitude pressed harder than the weight of duty. Daniel felt his breath become shallow, though his body stayed upright. Inside his mind, the past and present blended into one heavy truth. He remembered his mother smiling again after weeks of fear. He remembered the letter that guided them toward help and hope. He remembered promising himself to serve with honesty and care. Standing still suddenly felt like turning away from that promise. The silence around him felt louder than any sound he had ever known. The coffin reached the point directly in front of Daniel. The flowers were close enough that he could see their soft colors clearly. For a brief second, everything else disappeared from his thoughts. There was no crowd, no city, and no watching eyes in his mind. There was only a quiet farewell happening before him. His chest tightened, and emotion rose like a strong wave. Daniel made his choice in that exact breath of stillness. Slowly and deliberately, Daniel lowered one knee to the ground. It was not rushed, and it was not dramatic. The movement was calm, respectful, and deeply personal. Gasps moved through the crowd like a sudden wind. People looked at each other, unsure of what they had just seen. Cameras caught the moment, spreading it across the nation. Protocol had been broken, and everyone felt it at once. Daniel bowed his head, his gaze lowered toward the ground. He placed his gloved hand over his heart without lifting his eyes. This was not an act of protest or pride. It was a gesture of thanks, simple and sincere. He held the position for only a few seconds. Yet those seconds felt endless to everyone watching. The meaning of the moment settled deeply into the crowd. The officers nearby felt shock and concern move through them. They knew the rules as well as Daniel did. They also knew the weight of the moment they were witnessing. No one moved to stop him, and no command was given. The procession continued, steady and dignified. The coffin moved forward, carrying silence with it. Daniel rose smoothly back into position, as if guided by instinct. As the ceremony continued, whispers spread among the people. Some wiped their eyes, and others held their breath. Many felt something shift inside them without knowing why. They did not yet know Daniel's story or his reason. They only knew they had seen honesty in a place of formality. They had seen emotion where they expected stone. The nation felt closer together without a single word spoken. Behind the scenes, officials exchanged uneasy glances. Breaking protocol during such a moment was serious. Questions were already forming, and reports would soon follow. Yet none of that reached Daniel in that instant. He stood once more like every other guard. But inside, he felt lighter, as if a long-held truth had been released. He knew the cost might come, and he accepted it fully. Later that evening, as the ceremony ended, the footage spread everywhere. People replayed the moment again and again. Some asked why the guard had knelt when no one else did. Others said they felt moved without understanding the reason. Families talked quietly about respect, gratitude, and humanity. Daniel watched none of it, sitting alone in a quiet room. He waited for whatever would come next with calm resolve. In his thoughts, Daniel returned to that bench from years ago. He saw his mother resting, her hand warm in his again. He heard the Queen's voice, steady and kind, guiding him forward. He realized that the kneel was not just for the past. It was for the future, and for the values she had lived by. He had honored her in the only way that felt true to him. And unknowingly, he had touched the heart of an entire nation. Daniel sat alone in a quiet room after the ceremony ended. The walls were plain and the light was soft and still. His uniform rested neatly on a chair beside him. The silence felt heavier than the noise of the crowd earlier. He replayed the moment again and again in his mind. Not with regret, but with calm acceptance. He knew the kneel had come from truth and not impulse. Outside the room, the palace moved with careful urgency. Officials spoke in low voices and steps echoed down long halls. No one raised their voice and no one rushed openly. The moment had been seen by millions and could not be undone. Some called it a mistake and some called it bravery. Most simply felt something deep without words. Daniel was unaware of the growing reaction across the nation. In homes across the country, people gathered around screens. Families sat close together watching the short clip repeat. Children asked questions and elders nodded with quiet tears. Many felt that the kneel had spoken what they could not say. It felt human in a place known for formality. It felt honest in a moment shaped by tradition. The nation began to lean toward understanding before explanation. News presenters discussed the moment with careful tones. They replayed the scene slowly from different angles. Experts spoke about protocol and history. Yet the public attention stayed fixed on the feeling. People were not angry, and they were not confused. They were moved by something simple and sincere. A guard had shown gratitude without asking for attention. Later that night, Daniel was asked to attend a private meeting. He walked through familiar halls with steady steps. His face remained calm though his heart was alert. He did not know what words would meet him. He only knew he would speak the truth if asked. The room he entered was quiet and respectful. Several senior officers waited with serious expressions. The questions came slowly and without accusation. They asked why he had done it and what it meant to him. Daniel listened carefully before he spoke. He told them about the bench and his mother Mary. He told them about the kindness that changed his direction. He spoke without drama and without tears. His voice stayed steady because the memory was clear. The room remained silent as Daniel finished speaking. Some looked down while others held his gaze. There was no anger in the air, only reflection. They understood that this was not defiance. It was a private thank you made public by circumstance. Daniel said he would accept any outcome. Duty still mattered to him as much as gratitude. While decisions were discussed behind closed doors, the public response continued to grow. Letters arrived from people across the country. Some shared stories of small kindnesses that saved them. Others said the kneel reminded them of shared humanity. The Queen was remembered not just as a leader, but as a person who noticed those who felt invisible. Mary watched the footage from her small living room. Her hands trembled as she saw her son kneel. Tears filled her eyes not from fear but from pride. She remembered that winter day clearly. She remembered the warmth that returned to her life. She whispered thanks into the quiet room, knowing her son had honored the kindness they received. The following morning the story reached beyond borders. People in other nations shared the moment with respect. Many said it showed dignity beyond words. They did not need long explanations to understand. The image spoke of gratitude, loyalty, and humanity. It crossed language and culture without effort. A simple gesture had become a shared feeling. Daniel spent that day waiting without distraction. He did not check messages or follow news. He trusted that honesty would guide the outcome. He reflected on his years of service. He knew he would stand again if allowed. And if not, he would still carry the values learned. The Queen had taught him that service lived beyond uniforms. Late in the evening, a message arrived for Daniel. He was asked to return to the same room. The officers greeted him with calmer expressions. They spoke of tradition and the need for order. They also spoke of meaning and public trust. Daniel listened without interrupting. His posture stayed respectful and open. They told him that rules existed for a reason. But they also acknowledged moments that transcend structure. They said his action had not weakened the ceremony. It had strengthened the connection with the people. They spoke of the queen and her quiet acts of kindness. They said Daniel had reflected her values. The decision they reached surprised even themselves. Daniel was informed that no punishment would follow. Instead, he was reminded of the responsibility he carried. He was asked to continue his service with the same integrity. The room felt lighter as the words settled. Daniel thanked them without emotion overtaking him. He stood tall knowing the meaning of the moment had been honored. The story was not over yet and the nation was still listening. Daniel returned to his post the next morning with the same steady walk. The palace grounds felt calm yet changed in a quiet way. People outside the gates stood with softer faces than before. Some nodded when they saw him and some placed hands over hearts. No one spoke directly to him and no attention was demanded. Yet Daniel felt the warmth of shared understanding around him. He stood tall knowing the moment had found its place. The days that followed moved gently without spectacle. Life returned to its rhythm of duty and service. Daniel continued his watches through long hours and changing weather. He followed protocol with the same discipline he always had. But inside him something felt settled and complete. The kneel no longer echoed as a question. It rested as a truth that had been fully lived. Across the nation conversations continued in quiet spaces. People spoke about kindness in small moments. Parents told children about helping without expecting reward. Teachers spoke of service as care rather than position. The Queen was remembered through stories both grand and simple. Her legacy felt closer to everyday life. A single gesture had opened many hearts. Mary received letters from people she had never met. They thanked her for raising a son with integrity. She read each message slowly with careful hands. Some letters spoke of hope restored during hard times. Others shared stories of loss and gratitude. Mary felt connected to people far beyond her home. She felt the Queen had brought them together once more. Daniel visited Mary one quiet afternoon. They sat together in the same small living room. Sunlight filled the space with warmth and calm. Mary looked at him with pride that needed no words. Daniel held her hand and felt the circle close. They shared silence filled with understanding. Both knew how one kind act had shaped many lives. At the palace, a small private remembrance was held. No cameras and no announcements marked the moment. Those who attended spoke softly of the Queen. They shared stories of times she had listened and noticed. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He understood that true influence often moved unseen. The room felt peaceful and deeply respectful. Weeks later the nation slowly moved forward. New stories took the place of old headlines. Yet the image of the kneeling guard remained. It lived in memory rather than news. People remembered how it made them feel. Connected, grateful, and human. That feeling became part of the shared story. Daniel continued his service year after year. He trained new guards with patience and care. He taught discipline along with empathy. He spoke of duty as something lived with heart. Those who listened carried the lesson forward. The ripple of one moment grew quietly. Service gained a deeper meaning. On quiet evenings Daniel sometimes walked past the old bench, the one near the palace where his life had turned. He never sat there for long. He simply paused and breathed in the memory. He thanked the past without longing. He stood ready for the future, knowing kindness always finds its way. The Queen rested in history with honor. Her life remembered through actions more than words. Daniel carried her lesson every day. That service is strongest when it holds humanity. That gratitude needs no permission. That one sincere moment can touch a nation. and that legacy lives through those who choose to care.